Cashamaniacs.
Geo Gearheads.
Hey, welcome to the Geo Gearheads. It's a feature of the Cashamaniacs Network. I am Chris of the Northwest, along with Daryl W4, and this is episode 434, Caching Ethics.
Always a fun topic, even though we've only done 3 of them.
I know, but you bring up such good points. There's good talking points when you ask, how should I be caching?
Yeah, well, and it's open for a lot of discussion, which is always what makes these so fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what's kind of sad? Most of the time we end up at the same conclusion. I really wanted more difference on the last show, but we all kind of came up to the same answers every time.
So that means we're right?
I would assume that it means we are right.
Oh, you know what? I don't always have to be right, but it helps.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure if it means that we're stacking the deck as well.
But we have a stacked guest list tonight. Daryl, why don't you introduce our wonderful guests?
All right, well, we start off with Merlin 1392 making a return appearance. Welcome back.
Thank you, guys. Good to be here.
And
Thanks
he's
for
also
having me.
the author of most of the points that we're going to be talking about today that we didn't get to on the last time we talked about it.
Well, that was okay. You guys were busy that time. So.
Oh, we had such a lengthy conversation, and I love it. And we're going to have, I'm sure, another one tonight. And to help us out, we've got WV Tim returning. Welcome.
Hey, how are you guys?
So I can actually bow out now too, because our replacement host has come.
That's right. You wasn't here a couple weeks ago, and I evidently kind of took over. So I was trying to think, Daryl who?
Hey, I appreciate it, and that was not a fun night because the power didn't come back on until 3:30 in the morning. So
we had a great time though.
We're starting to freeze because the heat is out and everything, and it was a cold night, and then everything starts beeping because the power comes back on. Dogs going crazy. So I got no sleep that night, and then I had to get the show out. So it was memorable. But yeah, I listened to that show the next day, and it was definitely a must-listen show.
Yep, I thought it was great. And of course, anytime WB Tim's in the house, you're going to get something special.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out why I'm here when you're talking about ethics.
Because we're trying to make it look like we're not stacking the deck.
I'm wondering if this is some type of a gang up on West Virginia 10. Let's get him on the show, and then let's hit him with all these questions. So I'm wondering, why I'm here.
Tim, you wanted to be a host. Welcome to being a host.
Well, you tell me when I take over for host. If Daryl needs to go to the bathroom or anything, then I can kind of use my host voice and welcome you to Geo Gearheads.
Apparently it's the WV Tim hour. So there you go. Thank you, Caching Dead.
Hey, before we get into tonight's topic, though, we do want to mention the postponing of the 2020 events in Seattle. We'll get into that more in a couple of weeks when we actually do our next randomized show. But everyone can now go and cancel those plans to Seattle, unfortunately, because the events out there have been postponed.
Yes, the 20th anniversary has been postponed a year. The Ape event's been postponed a year, and Geo Woodstock has been postponed a year.
Yeah, so it's still going to be the same rough time frame,
right?
But we'll share that again next year. But I know it affects a lot of people. And Merlin 1392, we were talking before the show, and that's, you don't have any idea what your epic August is going to look like now, because you had a lot planned for this year, and it's
definitely going to be at least half of what it was, and it might be even less than that. And the postponement of the event, the wild card here is that it is a week later than it was this year. So they kicked it out a week. And as far as I understand, the airlines will let you reschedule your ticket up to 1 year in advance. So I may have to go out early in order to get the airline rescheduled to the time. I don't know. It's going to be fun. It's, everything's weird.
Julie is saying that she's already planning for 2021. And I'm sure a lot of people are doing the same thing, especially if they already had plans for 2020. But I am hearing a lot of people running into delays and getting that done. And that's just happening all over the place. We're trying to do a bunch of stuff at work with getting contracts renewed, licenses, that kind of stuff, only to find that there's like no one working those companies right now. So there's like the 4 or 5 people who are still there trying to handle the normal workload. It's the same kind of thing almost all over the place.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about that. Let's talk about geocaching.
Oh,
we're talking about geocaching ethics.
Oh, ethics. Okay.
Ethics.
I just wanted to talk about going outside and go geocaching. That's hard.
And how to cheat at geocaching, right?
Yeah,
that's what the ethics is about. How to make
we can do that.
Cheat and not seem like you are. But most of the stuff that we have on the agenda tonight actually comes from the Winter Social. It's items that you, Merlin 1392, had found came up at that event. So why don't we kick off the first of those points? We have a big geo art releasing on the 29th, which was of February, I believe, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
There's an 8 a.m. event where the CO intends to provide the answers to all the puzzles along the trail. Attendees will have an advantage over everyone else. Is this fair? And we did actually talk about this briefly, I think, on the last show, but it's definitely worth bringing up again. Because, a lot of events that do the same kind of thing, including the first to finds to everyone at the event.
Yeah, I know events that have done first to find for everybody that's there. I've done some events where you draw a cache out of a hat, and that cache you get to claim the first to find on to go get it. And, I guess I'm going to put a disclaimer on my comments right here and say the comments I say might not be the ones I believe, but if we all smile and nod and go, yep, we agree, this is going to be a very boring show. So I may take an anti-opinion just because, okay?
Absolutely. I love it.
Well, that's fair.
And that was the question that we had is, okay, if I'm going to give you the answers, and, Tim, you've made some amazing gadget caches. If I solve one and then I tell everyone how to get into it, how do you feel about that? Is that right? Is that ethical?
Well, that happens. That's got to happen a lot. The proof of that is that on opening day, when I put out my gadget caches, the last one we kicked off last summer when we kicked off the Geo tour, we kicked it off, and about an hour or two later, I hit the road and wanted to see people finding my caches, because that's something a cache hunter doesn't get to do. And I love to watch people try to solve a gadget cache. Well, I walked up to several caches, probably 3 or 4, and people had been there for an hour, hour and 15 minutes. And I would give them a little hint one at a time. But the point is, it took them a long time to try to solve it. Months and months later, you start getting logs and it says, I was there for, it took us about 5 minutes. And I'm thinking either a lot of people are brilliant because there's a lot of people that now can solve this cache in 5 minutes, that when the cache was first out, it took groups of people, 10 and 15 people, 20 people, it took them an hour, hour and a half, and they were working on it. So you know that people start talking. And to me, it's still, of course, it's still fine. It's still fair. But I think they're just cheating themselves, because what they've missed is the fun it takes to try to solve the cache. Um, so I always, and people play the game different. It's interesting because, I put my telephone number on most of my gadget caches because I don't want people there for an hour, 2 hours. Most of the people, well, I'd almost say 95% of the people who find my caches are from out of town, maybe 98, 99%. I don't want them there for hours. They're going to not have an enjoyable time. So I put my name on there, but it's interesting because a lot of times I'll say, hey, do you want to, they call and they say, we want a hint. And I go, okay. And I'll give them a hint. And I'll say, well, hey, call me back if you need anything else. And they go, hold it. Can you stay there just a second? And they go, yeah. And they go, can you give me another hint? And so I go, okay. So, they hadn't had time to work that hint out, right? So they try to solve that. Couple of minutes later, they go, hey, can I get another hint? I go, can I just ask you a really just blank question? You just be really honest with me. Or do you really want a hint, or you just want me to tell you how to get in it? They go, would you just tell me how to get in it? So, different people play the game differently. And I think there still are people that will sit in front of mine for an hour. But there are also the same people that are there for 5 minutes, and they're probably both going to enjoy it. But the guy was there for 5 minutes, got a hint from somebody else, because there's no way they got in there. So I kind of take the idea that it's their loss, it's their game, and let them kind of play it like they want. I personally would like for them to try to at least enjoy the cache. I think they would enjoy it more if they tried to solve it without a hint.
Well, GSM times 2 is kind of calling you out, saying that you used to make videos on how to open your caches.
Yeah, I got to start looking to live notes. He is calling me out. That's true, but I never posted those immediately. Like the trail that's out now has been out for a year, and there's not I haven't posted a single video on that trail. So I normally post those because what I'm trying to do is balance the cache finder with the cache builder. I want to help cache builders because I think that helps our game. But I also, kind of want to help the cache finders that are really struggling. But I don't normally help them till maybe a year later. So yes, that's true. I probably have 25 videos. They've been watched 1.5 million times. So it does ruin it for some people. But as soon as you watch one of mine, and that's a giveaway, and you're coming to West Virginia to find my caches, then hopefully you wouldn't watch anymore, right? So it's still it's a choice. You're going to see one and go, my gosh, he shows us how to open it. But then I'm going to West Virginia, I better not watch it. So it's still a choice thing. But yeah, that's right. I do show some.
Well, I will admit that those videos have inspired 2 WV caches up here in Michigan. So I've got one with the lights with the battery on the one side, and I have the Guess Who game in the workshop right now being built while I can't do anything else.
So, that's a cute cache.
Thank you for posting those videos, and GSM times 2, just don't watch them.
No, that's great. No, that's great. And I always tell people, don't give me any credit. That's a waste of cache page. So I love it when people take those ideas, because a lot of people they really just need help starting. And yours would be different than mine anyway, right? If I went up to yours, I'm still going to have to solve it. I might know, like the Guess Who game, that's as different as night and day. So your story is different, my story, and the men's different, and the characters are different. So all you're really trying to do is just encourage creativity, and that's been probably my biggest goal, is encourage creativity. So
on the creativity one again, folks may or may not know that one of the roles, other than being an avid geocacher or an obsessive geocacher, is that I'm also the vice president for the Michigan Geocaching Organization. So we get a lot of these things. And when you talk about playing the game the way you will, the other question is we do from our organization a challenge of the month. And in the challenge of the month, we have certain goals. Last year for the month of March, which is a 4-leaf clover month because of St. Patty's Day, the cache was pretty easy. Find 4 caches on 4 days of 4 weeks in order to reach the top end goal. And we got back a lot of feedback that said, one of the users said she can't go out 4 days a week. So she went out on Saturday, found 16 caches, and then logged 4 each day through the week to meet the qualifications. Is that fair? Is it ethical? Should we do anything about it, since she said to a friend, this is what I've done, and she logs each caches for the day she's done? So I guess the concept there is called banking. So what do you think about banking caches?
All right, I'll pipe up first on that one, and it's that simply is cheating. It is unethical. You know, this is a contest that requires you to complete those tasks. So if you can't do those tasks as stated, then yes, it's cheating. And no, it is not ethical. And
what should we do about it?
Well, that's a bigger problem that is built into the contest.
Right.
But my impression is, you know, for those kind of things, that player should be disqualified.
Okay. And we've had some other players that have said, you know, not unlike you, that you've cached out your entire area. So for you to go find any cache for any challenge means you've got to drive 60, 70, 80 miles. Mm-hmm. So again, we were told, okay, we go hit a power trail on a weekend and then just start logging caches over time. And yeah, I find that that's not the way I like to play. But if I'm looking at logs and you log the cache 1 on each day, how do I know you didn't do it? And it becomes your word against somebody else's word. And
right. And that's the problem with the enforcement, is how do you prove such a thing?
Yeah. So that we didn't really want to get into that. And I had a similar discussion a couple of years ago. I went and visited the Wisconsin Geocaching Association, some friends up there, since we're all in a group together. And I had a lady from the organization say, you know, I've really been turned off to geocaching because of this. Let me tell you this. And her and her husband were very avid geocachers. They became the state's #1 finder, and they did it legitimately. Person B wants to be the #1 finder, is part of a caching group. Whenever this caching group would go out, they would all log caches as the group. Even if the particular player was not part of the party on that day, they would still log the caches that they made it. And soon she became the they became the #1 cacher in Wisconsin. It was kind of a bitter taste in person A's, because they did it this way, person B did it that way. And what did I think? And I said, well, what do you win for being first? And she said, nothing. I said, well, what do you get? What do you get for being first? And she said, nothing. I said, then why do you care? If everybody knows she did it this way, there's no credibility in that number. You're #2, but everybody knows how you got there. You're going to have a lot more esteem. So I said, why do you care? She said, well, my name's below hers. I said, well, okay. You know, I didn't really have a great answer for it. Ethical or not?
Well, and technically, according to the guidelines, they didn't find those caches if their name's not on the log. And this is one of the big arguments as well for whether you should sign individually or as a team. And a lot of cache owners do not let the team's log, names go in the logs.
Right.
If you log as a team, you don't count.
And I've seen several of those teams break up and go hit, two different caches or, two different paths so they get done quicker, and they're logging with, that team name. So half of the caches, you didn't even touch. No, you shouldn't log those.
Well, and GSM times 2 brings up the issue with the power trails and the leapfrogging.
Right.
And for people who don't know, you get the leapfrogging on power trails, which is two or more teams. Team A goes to like the even caches, and Team B goes to the odd caches, so that you get
I always
done.
end up with the odd
time.
caches, and I don't know why.
I could tell you, Chris, but you wouldn't like the answer.
Well,
so.
let's stay on after the broadcast and tell me why.
Okay. All right. I can do that.
RG brings up, what about cachers that sit in cars and other cachers find the cache and claim the find and have the other cacher sign their name? Now, there could be some legitimacy here. If you're the designated driver, you especially on something like a power trail, you don't all get out to go get it. But as long as you're there and you've assisted, I don't have a problem with that. But
and what about the cachers that might have an injury or a disability or something like that too?
Yeah. Well, I've done that.
Been disabled?
Well, no,
Injured.
I was temporarily disabled.
Okay.
So there was a cache series. I was out with IHAM, and we were walking across the field, and I find a hole, and I twist my ankle, and I twisted it both ways. I don't know how I did that, but both sides. And I went down, and I was like, oh, that's it. I know I'm done for the day. But there are 2 more caches in this series to get. We got 1 more, and then we got the final. I'm not going to stop.
That's when you get your splint out, and
Okay.
your Boy Scout ties, and you do that.
So, well, almost. So I drove to the next one. It was my left foot, so I could still drive. And it was a park and grab. So I let, the other cacher go get it. And then I hobbled to the final. I was like, I'm going to be at this final. It's a fantastic final. And, so, okay, that did happen. I admit I sat in the car, but that's an example of, okay, I was injured. Yeah.
Right.
Or,
JD is bringing up the point of the cache machines, which I believe you've actually participated in quite a few of them.
Yes.
And it's a lot of people signing the names in the log to save the space. And, that's my big motivation, especially on like the day of the events, kind of rolling it back to the original question. The day of the events, you get a lot of people hitting it all at the same time. And especially if you have these smaller log sheets, that's a big problem.
Right. Now, I don't have a problem with team names. I'll say that right now. I don't have a problem with team names.
And I don't either.
And I put that in my log. It was signed as, team, I don't care who we are. And we'll put that in there. Again, that creates 1 line on a log instead of 4 or 5. And on these smaller logs on busy days, that saves space. But if that team breaks up and goes and finds, different caches, you shouldn't log the cache you didn't help find.
Well, and one of the things I like to do with those team names is put everyone in the logs. And I just use the log templates on Cachely now. I've done it through other programs in the past. But, the whole point that we're getting at is that when you've got a group of 8 or more cachers, it's a lot to put on the log. So it makes it easier. And I always like putting who I'm caching with in my logs online anyway. So having that makes it a lot easier. And it kind of even gets back into stickers, because a lot of people have problems with stickers on the logs.
Stickers,
they fall off. And the last comment was is right. The team is the team, and I've done initials for our team that we sang it. Merlin, M. Kettle is one of the guys I go out with. Dirt Bike Granny is another cacher that I go with, and so we'll be the M&MD group, and we'll assign logs that way. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that is ethical. And I agree with Chris that if you're going to split the team up, if you're going to go one way, you're going to go the other way. Now, this particular Wisconsin cacher was found out because one of the members of the team that was logging caches in Wisconsin was found on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean on the same day. And it was like, you can't be doing both here. So
Right.
which is it? So that's how they got outed, if you will. And so, that's an issue.
And that gets into another set of problems as well of, the proximity, and even a semi-legitimate one is like a couple that caches under the same account.
I'm sorry.
Finding them on two different continents at the same time.
My wife, who caches under my name because she'll find one or two caches a day, was with her girlfriends in Florida. And she texted me and she says, you'll never guess. We got a first to find in Florida. I was on a caching trip in Indiana. And I'm logging caches as we're going through the day. And I'm like, you got a first to find. I'm going to log it. I'm going to be in Indiana, Florida, Indiana. Now, come to find out, she found a blank log. The CO had replaced the log. It wasn't a first to find. Cache was 10 years old, but she was so excited. She was happy. I logged the cache because it was the second cache she's ever found. It's part of my numbers. I can live with that one.
Yeah. Well, and I don't have so much of a problem with that, but it does make it an issue if you're trying to go for some of those stats of, the biggest distance in the same day. That's a problem.
Hey, but just think how good his. Do you have a personal trackable that you dip in each cache? Because I have one that I dip in each cache. So you'd have got a lot of miles on your personal trackable because it went from Indiana to Florida, then back to Indiana. Because it goes into sequence that it's logged. So yeah, you could have stuck some miles on your trackable doing that.
I could have. And again for there's another one. Yeah.
Coon and Bud, his wife was at Disneyland. He was at Geo Woodstock.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time. And especially, the married couples aren't going to necessarily have their own individual accounts because, they're going to cache together most of the time. And sometimes when you don't, that's going to happen. But a lot of people do get bent out of shape about it because it throws off those stats.
Right. And again, if it's part of a challenge for that month to find X number of caches, now you've just added one more to your stats that aren't really, it's not really valid.
Right.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, I was going to say, and in those cases, I think it's up to the cache owner to not participate in those kind of challenges. That's you're not playing by the rules of that challenge.
Right.
So it's up to you as a participant to act in an ethical manner and not participate.
Exactly. I was going to say, and it's okay for the occasional cache find to do that, but if you're using it as part of a contest or was that your first cache find in Florida? Did you earn a souvenir because of that?
I did not. No,
it's one of those. Are you doing it for a souvenir challenge? Say, Earth Cache Day. That was one that was brought up earlier in the chat there. That somebody will say, "Well, I can't get out that Saturday. Maybe I'm working. I'm visiting. I'm doing something else. I've got to mow the lawn and binge watch Tiger King." And so I'm going to go find it earlier and I'll just log it on that day. So I get the souvenir.
Well, and GSM times 2 hit the nail on the head with most of these questions we're discussing currently. It's a matter of intent.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Is the person intending to bend the rules or, is it just, it happens to be that way? So, for these kind of questions, it is mostly about the intent.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've had a friend of mine ask me up here in Lake Michigan, there is a dive cache that's I want to say it's about 80 feet in the lake bottom. And he's like, I'm not a scuba diver, but I would really, really like to have this 5.5 cache. You're a scuba diver. Is there any way you can help me get this cache? And I said, well, yeah, I could teach you how to be a scuba diver. Or you get the boat, you get the captain. I'll find a buddy to dive with me. You're part of the team that's helping carry the gear to the boat. You're out on the water with us. I have no problem signing the cache with all of our names on the bottom of the lake because you've helped find this cache. I know people that will have a problem with that.
And that brings me to another point that I wanted to make when we were talking earlier about the people who sit in the car. There are a number of caches where it is not safe for the entire party to make the climb, to make the dive, whatever. So in those kind of cases, I think it would be irresponsible to force everyone to sign that log individually. That doesn't mean we can't still have the discussion about should they claim it, but as long as you're an active participant in the find, I don't have a problem with that. And a lot of people have said it's, you have to see the cache, which I get the intent behind that, and I would definitely prefer it. But I can say without any question that I have had caches that I haven't seen that we signed as part of a team, especially things like those power trails.
Well, I think there's times with those 5.5s, you actually need a support team. I can think of one. We have one here in West Virginia that's in the Potomac River, and it's on an abandoned railroad bridge pier. I think it's 100 feet up in the air in the middle of the river. So I would love to get it because there hasn't been that many people find it. It was placed by a helicopter. The helicopter landed on top of the bridge pier, laid the cache with a weight, and so it's on top of this bridge pier. So it's a well-known, there are 5.5s that aren't 5.5s. Right. But this is a true 5.5. I mean, it takes advanced planning. I mean, there's people work for weeks trying to figure out how to get to this cache. So the side story of this is I signed that log. But and I am not a climber, but I'm sitting there talking to a couple of friends that were very young. I mean, I'm getting near 70. They were very young, and they were talking about geocaching, and they go, "Well, I spend so much time climbing, rock climbing, that I don't have time for a hobby." And I go, "Oh my gosh, you know that bridge pier in the middle of the Potomac River?" And they go, "Yeah, we know exactly which one." I said, "Could you get up that bridge pier?" And they go, "Oh, we could climb that bridge pier." I go, "How would you do it?" And they go, "We'd free climb it because there's holes in the rocks and we'd set these things and we could climb that bridge pier." And I said, "Could you get an old man up that bridge pier?" And they go, "We'd free climb it. And then you can come behind us with this little thing where you pull up and you come behind them." The first guy is really, really talented. But then we also had to have a guy stay with the boat. It's in the middle of the river. And so if you're a cacher on that 5.5, you have to have a support team. So in those cases, I could see value in doing that. I was not going to be the guy in the boat because I'm too ethical. I am not going to have them sign a log for WV10 when I'm sitting in the boat. So those guys got me up that bridge pier, and I went up 100 feet, some of the best pictures I've ever taken. And I went up that, climbed a 100-foot bridge pier straight up in the middle of the Potomac River. But those cases I agree with because you have to have support. I'm okay. I'm personally okay with the ones that you contribute. Now, if you're on the side and you're a photographer, I don't know. That wasn't really necessary. But I mean, if you're a support team on a 5.5, I would personally be okay with that.
All right,
And
let
I
me
know-
ask you one question about the person who's the photographer, the videographer. If it's a situation where they can't safely get to the cache with everyone else there, is that still a problem for you?
What do you mean they can't? Oh,
Like,
they can't.
let's say you're climbing that trestle, for instance, and there's just physically not enough room for everyone to safely be climbing that trestle. So they're down below shooting their videos, stills, whatever they're getting. Do they still get to claim it because it would be too dangerous for everyone to make it up there at the same time to claim that?
Well, see, I think the videographer on the side's really not contributing. Person up on the top can easily just, you know, shoot down, coming down to ball, and make room at the top. I think a 5.5 like that, you ought to really be contributing to the find. A picture taker on the side, ethically, I wouldn't do it. I mean,
All right.
Oh, okay.
they
Tim?
offered to go up there and had me stay in the boat, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me put a wrinkle into this. What if they go up there, get the log, bring the log to you, you physically sign it, and they return it? Would you claim that? See, now I've stumped him.
On a
I think he froze
5.5,
up.
Oh, there he goes.
I wouldn't because see, I think if I didn't contribute, and a 5.5 ought to be something, a true 5.5 ought to be something that you really worked at. That's an achievement. I think that a 5.5 is an achievement, especially one like that. That's well known all over the nation. People have come and there's film crews, film people caching on that, you know, on that one. To sign that log and not just because, and I didn't do anything. They brought it over in the canoe and said, "Hey, you want to sign the log?" I personally wouldn't do it because I would want to achieve that. I would want to find that cache.
Well, Coon and Bud wants to know, what about if the photographer loans the pen, but then they're doing something that's part of it?
You've got all the gear, but you've forgotten the pen. You've got the
hey.
tank, you've got the climbing gear.
Well, hey, if you've got all that climbing gear, you can't carry the pen as well,
There's no
right?
room for the pen.
Right.
No, yeah. Hey, I think I had like 4 pins on that cache. I think I had a couple pins and a pencil, and there was one in it. It was a small lock and lock. And now they actually have drones, you know, that can go up and you can see this cache. But I don't know. I just wouldn't take credit for it, for a 5.5. I just would not take credit because I just feel that's like an accomplishment that you should earn. And no, loaning the pen, I'd say no. But now there are people, and there are groups of people that have got that locally. You know, they've shot arrows over it, but canoes had to be on one side, there had to be canoes on the other. People had to bring equipment. I mean, that whole team. You know, if you work at doing it, I think it's okay. But I don't know if on those like that, I just think I'm really have a very high ethical standard, and I was not going to let those guys go up there, grab that thing, bring it down to me, be holding the canoe. I wanted to be up that thing, and I posted my picture at, you know, climbing that cache. My wife took the picture. She's a geocacher. She didn't claim it. She was on the sideline. She was taking the picture. So there's a good example. The photographer did not get to claim the cache. But I've got great pictures. That's a great memory.
Cool.
Well, Caching Dead is with you. He says, put in the work, take the credit.
He's a good man.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I generally accept that. Now, okay, we've talked about a true 5.5. One of my first 4.5 caches was about 60 miles south of me. So I plan to go for this cache because there aren't many 4.5s. And I didn't know what I was going to get into. I didn't know the area. I didn't know the trails. I expected the worst. It was about 100 feet from the parking lot, down an easy trail in the crotch of a tree that was at waist height for me. I signed the log. I claimed the find. I didn't feel good about it. But that's what the CO put out. Is it right?
Yes, that's absolutely right, because the cache owner set that standard, and he's the one who said it was a 4.5. Now, what I have done, but I've only done it once, and I'm not a guy who likes I don't like to fight with other cachers, and I don't like conflict, but I found a cache one time that was a 5.5, and it's in a here's the story. I found a cache that was like a 3.3, and I ended up having to crawl in a tunnel with water up to my knees, like 200 feet in, and it had a turn. So you have to have a flashlight. I'm in knee deep water, and it might have even been a 2.53. Difficulty was a 2.5. And I got back and I said, that's not a 2.5. And you know what his answer was? I still remember this. He's like, there wasn't any 2.53s for any of the local cachers trying to, solve their grids. And so I made that a 2.53. Plus, I find that more people, true story, more people go after that cache if they think it's a 2.5. I said, that cache isn't a 2.5, it's a 4. It's at least a 4, because you're crawling in water that during certain seasons is knee high. And I said, that's not a 2.5. It's misleading. And they said, well, not only the grid, but also I find more people will attempt it if it's a 2.5. If I'd put it as a 4, a lot of people just wouldn't even attempt it, and I want more fines. So I got in an email string. Have you ever done that? Get in an email string with somebody. So then I go, well, here's my point. Here's his point. Here's my point. You can't win those.
No.
So I learned a lesson really early on. You know what? If the guy puts it up in the tree that it's up waist sign is 4.5, it's not worth it for me to start getting in a hassle and a fight with another geocacher. I just kind of say, I might leave a hint in a log. I try to always leave very positive logs, because when I first started caching, those logs meant a lot to me, and especially in the geocaching community when you're known. I mean, if Daryl W4 found one of my caches, I'd be reading his log going, oh my gosh, a celebrity found one of my caches. It's pretty cool, So I found out now I got to be really careful, because a lot of people know the name WV Tim. And so when I leave a log, I try to type a nice, even if it's bad, I try to find something like, boy, the day was beautiful. There was good food nearby. I'll try to say something positive in the log. Yeah, I just stay out of. It's just not worth fighting over. So I don't, Merlin. I would never, call a cacher on that. I would, I'd maybe leave a hint like in the log to say a gentle hint and say it's a fairly easy 4.5, 4.5.
I think this was one of the last ones I needed for my the first round of the Fizzy Grid, and I think I did that. I said, it was a great day. Thanks for the cache. This is the easiest 4.5 I've ever found. Great.
And that's helpful for next finder, because they go, right. I'm really not up for, you get to be my age, you get to be 70, and you go, some of these are, I go, well, I'm not up for a 4.5. But if I read a couple logs that says that was a pretty easy 4.5, then I go, what, I think I can do that. So I think that's helpful to the community. I don't think, I'm just staying away now from, getting into arguments with cache owners, because you can't win them. And then you end up getting people's feelings get hurt. So I just kind of stay away from that.
Yeah, there's an interesting point about reading the logs, though, because I know a lot of people who just don't really pay much attention to what they're putting in the logs. They'll get a little bit too spoiler-ish, maybe, or critical of the caches until they get like one or two people calling them out on it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know what? People are actually reading these logs. I better pay attention to what I'm writing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I do. I don't think maybe only one or two logs have I ever deleted. Like if I'll get somebody, I'll get 50 finds on my gadget caches that are averaging 4 difficulty. They'll log 50 of them in a day, and I look at him, and he's in South Carolina, and he also logged one in Florida that same day. It probably was Merlin. It was probably a Merlin.
I have not been to West Virginia yet.
So I have deleted a couple logs, but I will encrypt logs often.
Mhm.
I will encrypt logs often because if it's a spoiler on one of mine, I don't mind them calling me for a hint, and I am good for a hint, or I'll tell them how to find it. If they're in a hurry, they just want to know, I don't mind that, but I don't want a spoiler in my logs. I've spent so many hours and hours and hours building these complex caches to make it fun for the community. I don't want it to just go to the cache page and see a spoiler and know you got to put the magnet at the right corner of the thing and the thing opens. So I do encrypt, but I don't erase.
All right. I've got one comment in the chat that I want to bring up because I think this is going to change things a little bit. So Wet Coaster says somebody has to be there to call 911. So, that photographer, that's their job. They're participating.
Officer.
He's not giving up, is he?
No.
You know what? As soon as this is over, Gary's probably going to call me and want me to climb that tower in Martinsburg. I mean, in Berkeley County, in the middle of the Potomac River, and he's going to bring the pin and the photographer, and he's going to claim that 5.5.
Well, and I'll do the same thing. I'm not 70 yet, but I'm 63. I'm 200 pounds. I will climb 15 feet in a tree. Beyond 20 feet, no. So I need someone to help me climb because the branches probably are not thick enough to hold me, and I don't have climbing gear.
I think those caches, those 5.5 caches, so you said you wanted a little disagreement. I'll disagree with Merlin on that. If you're too big to climb that tree, I think there's some caches that just we're not meant to find. I mean, that cache, like you all were talking, that's 80 feet down in the water. I can't scuba dive, so that cache is not for me, and it's okay that cache. That I don't get to claim that cache. So I think there are some caches, especially the extreme caches, that are just not for everybody. And I think that's okay part of the game. I mean, look at it this way. I'm a dumb West Virginia country boy. I can't do half the puzzles out there. And so I can claim mental a mental deficiency because I can't solve some of these puzzles. So I can't say, well, I'm not very smart. I should be able to claim it because my friend claimed it. I can't claim a puzzle because I haven't been able to figure it out. Well, I don't think you're going to be able to, if you can't climb more than 15 feet and the cache is up 30 feet, I just say you don't get to claim that cache. That's my view of the world.
Well, I understand. I'll hold the ladder for the kid that goes up the tree.
Yeah, see, and in that case, you're participating, right?
Right. I'll be participating. So I got one more for you. Here's a gadget cache, one that you made. It's a little library. So we've all seen them little libraries that are sitting out front. You open the door, and You look inside and there's a book right there. And it says guest book on it, and you sign it. Put it back in the cash and move on. Now, the rating of this cash is a 2.5, 1. Well, if you read the description, it highlights 2 words specifically, the word key and the word hole. So there's something special about this cash, more than being able to open the door and see the guest book. Somebody signed the guest book, but didn't sign the log. Is that a mistake? Is that cheating? What is that?
I would say that's misleading. Because I don't know, that to me would be, that's kind of misleading. If I saw a guest book there, I'd be tempted to sign it too. I'm not sure. I would say that's an innocent mistake.
Yeah, because the guest book has instructions on it that says if you take a book, please note it in the guest book. If you leave a book, please note it in the guest book. It doesn't say anything about a cash being there in the guest book.
What if on the cash page you said you must sign the piece of paper that has these words on top?
I think the cash page says you have to sign the log in order to get credit.
Right.
I don't remember. I know it definitely talks about, the introduction to the cash talks about the keyhole as being the secret to the cash. So my comment for the person that found it was, if it's a 2.5, 1, and the guest book is there when you open the door, that's not a 2.5. Now,
true. Unless
somebody was trying to make a fake 2.5, like, Tim talked about earlier, that could be, but that wasn't this person's, and that wasn't the CO's intent here. The CO's intent was, this is a 2.5 because it's a gadget cash. And you could tell from looking at because my buddy and I went and we looked at this cash because it's a very highly favorited cash. And he looked at that guest book and said, this is what we got to sign. And I said, no, that's not a 2.5. It's right there in plain sight. There's something we're missing. And I found the key.
And RG says, put on the cash page that the guest book is not the log. And I kind of agree with Just Finding Our Way that it's a design flaw.
Could be. Yeah.
I agree. One of the things I've had people a lot of times will find my caches because I have a couple of visitor centers along the interstate, and those are great stops for newbies. So they stop and they can't get in it. And so I've gotten many logs that says found, my GPS led me right to the box and I could tell it was a geocache, but I couldn't find it. And so they logged it as a find. And I get that all the time. So they didn't solve it, but they claimed it as a find. Well, a lot of times then, if I'm in the mood and I have time, I'll go click on that person's profile. If they've got, under 100 caches, then what I normally do is write them a really nice note and say, hey, I see you're new. Welcome to geocaching. You're going to love this sport and that I love so much. But not normally, I'll say you need to this was a gadget cache and you need to be able to solve it to be able to sign the log. So you might want to go back and change your comment from a found log to a note. And then in the future, be sure to read the cache page and try to find it. Look at the difficulty. So I have this whole paragraph that I have written up, and I'll go grab it and I'll stick it in and I'll send it to them privately. I do not erase their log because I think that can be discouraging. Because here's a guy with 50 finds, and here he has some hotshot, deleting his log. He goes, what's that all about? What I really try to do is educate the cacher. Now, that might not be ethical because theoretically, I have the right to delete that log, right? But I think it's more about trying to help people and bring them along and encourage them. And so a lot of times I just try to do some training in my logs, but I still won't erase their logs. Should I have? I mean, if they got 55.
That's the question. That's why we're here tonight.
Well, and technically, I believe you are obligated to delete the logs because it says that you have to sign the physical log in the guidelines. Now, that doesn't mean that that's what I do as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Tim. But I got into a debate with one of the other people on the board at MyGo where his attitude was simple: find a cache, log a cache, done. I'm like, well, we haven't talked about challenge caches tonight. When do you log a challenge cache? The day you sign the log, the day you complete the challenge, or the day you realize you completed the challenge and you're ready to log caches.
Because you could sign it on Leap Day on February 29th, right?
You could.
And now you've got your leap year souvenir by solving your challenge cache on the February 29th.
Yeah, and I probably have 200 or 300 challenge caches that I have signed, written a note on, and then they're on a list on Project GC. And every now and again, I'll go through that list and I'll see a green check mark. And I'll go, oh, I qualify for that now. I didn't even realize it. And do I keep it in the bank? Do I sign it on that day? Or am I amiss because I didn't sign it on the day I qualified?
See, with that kind of stuff, I don't really have a problem with signing it later, because you've completed the signing of the log, and you were waiting on actually meeting the qualifications. A lot of people do that because you're not going to get to these challenge caches many times, except when you're traveling.
And that's part of the new guidelines, is that you can sign it, write a note, and when you qualify, that's when you can log it.
Right.
But but is it the day of, or when you realize you qualify, or when you want to take it?
Well, the trouble is with doing it the day of, you might not even realize that you've qualified till later.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, it should be logged when you know that you've qualified for that cache.
On the day you know you qualify.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you know that you qualified for it, like a week or so ago, then that's the date that you should be using. I don't have a problem with people doing, later dates, but my belief is it has to be on the date that you actually qualified for it or later.
And I think a lot of our discussion has been that of, what is it to you? What do
it
you
goes
deem
back
it?
to the intent.
Yeah. If your intent is to meet a challenge or meet some other kind of goal, or use it to get an award or something like that. And part of it for me is, if you can justify it, if you can justify your actions, who am I to question that?
Right.
I learned long ago that we all have a right to our opinion, but we don't have to make somebody else agree with our opinion.
And the game is full of lots of different people with lots of different opinions, and they have their own versions of what's ethical and not.
After what you just said, you must be married, Daryl.
I don't think that's necessarily a married answer.
No, but that was the last time I was right. Was the day before I got married.
See, I'm thinking, I went from a small office to a bigger office, and I'm learning, that's kind of a business thing now too. If you work in any company of any size, I think that that's kind of those kind of questions go along there too. It's always the people who get paid more than you that are right in those cases. So
How true that is. Yes, your salary determines your correctness.
exactly.
Wow.
All right.
I mean, we have talked about some very controversial topics. The chat is going wild. There's more information in there than we can talk about on this show. Gentlemen, we may need to have you back
I haven't
just
even
to
looked
finish
at the
this
chat.
up.
Well, we can do that.
And this is
Okay.
one of those questions that's never going to end. We're going to have to cover these many, many times. And yet again, I don't think we've actually come up with any real answers.
Right.
And I really
You
don't think there
evidently-
are.
You evidently wasn't listening to my answers.
Okay, we've expressed a lot of opinions.
I thought I had some darn good answers.
Well, we've had a lot of excellent points for sure, but unlike the last time where I think we all kind of landed on the same thing, I think we've had a lot more differences in our opinions this time.
Yeah.
So I love it. This has been a great show, but we do have to wrap it up because we are over that hour mark now. So thank you, gentlemen, again for an excellent show. Merlin 1392, where can people find more about your stuff?
They can message me through the geocaching.com. I'm also available through the Michigan Geocaching Organization. You can find our website at mi-geocaching.org.
All right. And WV Tim, where can people find your stuff?
I'm simple. I've got everything on my profile on geocaching.com.
Which, of
Or
course,
YouTube.
we'll link to in the show notes. All right. Thank you again, gentlemen. And next week, we've got another great show. GSM Times 2 is coming back again to talk about GSAC. Teach me for not looking at the show notes. And then we've got another randomized show. So make sure to join us for either or both of those shows and send us all of your comments, questions, and points of interest because we've got that randomized show coming up, which is going to be packed. So we might have to do 2 back-to-back again. Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the Geo Gearheads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron to the link on the website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. Geo Gearheads is produced by Chris Suffenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show is copyright 2020 by Daryl Wattenberg, all rights reserved.